Okay, so now we're going to talk about uh, exam number two. Now, needless to say, you have not had exam number one this semester, and that's because it was on those older theories like Freud and Adler, and existentialism would have been very difficult. But so I deleted exam one. You're not going to take it. Uh, so you don't have to worry about that. So that's why we're beginning with exam two, okay? Because you don't have to take exam one. So when you submit your exam, you're going to submit it to exam two Dropbox, and it's right on the page I'm going to share with you. But let's see. So let's go there. And yeah, so uh, we are in class seven right now. And when you think about it, our semester, once we get past spring break, we're like halfway done with the semester because that's week eight. And so there's only 15 weeks in a semester and finals week. So yeah, once we're done with spring break, we're halfway through the semester. And so I don't call these exams like midterm and final or anything. They're all equal. They're not cumulative. So, we'll have the exam on these three theories, and then the next exam will be on another three theories. There, we don't just keep adding to each exam. So we just move forward. And so uh, let's see, we already discussed the due date and the update in the updates. And so under class seven in the content, you'll be able to see uh, exam to Dropbox. And so I'm going to read it. So uh, you don't have to look at it unless you want to. But okay, so you've first things first. You've got with spring break, you've got 2 weeks to take the exam. But hey, spring break goes quickly, and then classes start again. And so don't wait, until, 2 days before or the day before. It's impossible to complete this exam in a night. So I've taken this exam before myself in a different format when I was in a master's degree. But so what helped me, and you can do it any way you want, but what helped me was I didn't want to mix up the theories in my own mind. So, like one day, I'd set aside 2 or 3 hours to do one of the theories and write about it. And then I'd pick another day to do a different theory. So I picked like 3 different days, and each day I'd work on one of the theories. And that helped me separate the theories in my mind and just focus on one theory. And yeah. And so the it's open book, it's open notes, and you have all of my lectures on D2L. And yeah. So I think, but it's not open internet. So please do not search the internet for answers. Just use your book, your notes, and my lectures. Um, and So you're going to submit it to this Dropbox, exam two Dropbox, and before your next class. And um, when we think about this, I'm going to talk a little bit about each theory and how you might formulate it because it really is kind of a unique formulation to answer these questions. Um, And yeah, so try to begin early to work on this. I think each question will take 2 or 3 hours, probably. Um, all right. So yes, it's open book. Yes, it's open notes. I would use my notes as kind of a checklist to make sure you covered everything. And, you know, there are certain things in the lectures where I clarified a few things in the notes. For example, like person-centered. In the lecture, I reviewed all of the techniques in the lecture and I just listed them and told you what each one was. So you actually have all of the answers. And the other thing I would caution is that I had to make a choice. I had to decide, do I want to give you an exam where you can't use notes or books or anything like that, like an actual exam, and memorize everything. And, each one has pros and cons each way. And I chose to have you apply the theory to a case because I want you to be able to use the theory. But that doesn't mean you don't have to memorize the theories. Even though you don't have to memorize the theory for my exams, you still need to memorize the theories. I just happen to memorize better when I apply things to a case or a situation. That's just the way I work. Um, but you're going to need to know these theories for the comps and for practicum and internship. So, just because it's open book and open notes, you still need to memorize the theories. Um, all right. So let's kind of review how to take the exam. And I tried to be as detailed as possible uh, in the write-up for this exam. So it's an application of theoretical knowledge, and we're going to use three different theoretical approaches, three questions, one question for each theory. Um, the case, I follow the example that Corey uses for case presentations, and he has a whole book called The Case of Stan, and mine is The Case of Sam. And so I think sometimes I mix them up. Yeah, I got Sam, he got Stan. All right. So I kind of followed Corey's format. And the idea behind this is that you can use any theory with any client. Yeah, some work better than others, depending on what their issue is. But, I wanted you to be able to apply all of the theories uh, to one case, just to see the difference between the theories. And, so if you had a client, you know, you'd be able to think about, oh, I wonder which theory I want to use here. Um, but they all have some benefit in some way, no matter who the client is. So I chose to give you an exam with the application of knowledge, not the memorization. All right, and so the case is about Sam, and Sam, I get it's a long case, but there's a lot of vagueness so that you can do whatever you want with Sam. And so but I do want you to use your own words. I don't want you to quote from the book. This is not a paper, it's an exam. It's an application of your knowledge to a case. So don't use quotes, don't quote things, don't copy things. Your Turnitin score, which is kind of like the D2L plagiarism program, needs to be below 5%. Okay. And it should tell you what it is. But so just use your own words. The other thing is don't copy the case in your exam or you'll automatically have more than 5%. So the only thing you need is my question and your answer. Okay. Now you can use all the terms from the notes or the book. So please use proper terminology. but that won't bring it above 5%. Um, all right. And hey, I know you're going to be working on this, and you can email me, and I'll probably be doing grading on discussion boards and all that kind of stuff. So I'll definitely answer your emails, and if you have any questions about this. So, uh, here's what you need to think about while you're taking the exam. How would you use each of these three theories to help the client if you were the therapist? Now, you can pretend to be the therapist in the question, or you could just be yourself using this theory. So you can be Rogers, or you could be yourself using Rogers' theory. Doesn't matter which way you look at it. Each theory should be easily recognizable for each question. So if I didn't know which question you were answering, I should be easily able to guess, oh, that's Rogers' theory. Oh, that's Pearl's theory. Um, so there shouldn't be any ambiguity about which theory you're using. Um, so you're not going to write about the theory. So this is not an undergrad exam. This is an application of the theory. It's not an exam on the theory, and it's an exam applying the theory. So you don't have to describe the theory to me. Okay, I'm going to assume that you know the theory and I know the theory. So I just want you to discuss how to apply the theory. All right. So each question and each answer should have three different parts. And you can just think about that as, three paragraphs, basically. Um, so the first part of your answer is going to take place in the past. And even though Gestalt talks about the present, you're really doing kind of a case review. You can assume that this is like the second or third session. And you're going to kind of give me a case history in the first paragraph. But you're going to use the terminology from the theory. Okay. So, you might, if we're talking about Gestalt, you might use the term kind of unfinished business or something like that. So, in the first paragraph, you can talk about the past. This is what the case is about. This is what happened in the past. So, for example, one of the problems in Sam's previous life was his dad. That's an obvious thing. You can only talk about Sam's dad in the first paragraph, in the past, because Sam's now an adult. His dad's not in therapy. So after the first paragraph, we're going to move to the second paragraph, which is the present. And we're not going to talk about Sam's dad anymore. First paragraph, family history. So, first paragraph, it's a discussion of the case using the theoretical concepts, extensive terminology, and a developmental outlook. Uh, use examples applied to the client. So, apply everything to Sam. You're not going to just talk about the theory, you're going to talk about Sam. Each theory looks at the case a little differently. The first section, is about case history and what brought the client to this point in their lives, to counseling. All right, so you can think about that one paragraph, the past. Okay. All right. The second part of the answer. All right. This is the primary part. It can be one long paragraph, but it's about a page. Okay. And so the discussion of a therapeutic session. So this is a session that's taking place. So you wouldn't write, well, if I had Sam as a client, I would. Well, no, you do have Sam as a client, and you are doing whatever you say. So write it from a perspective that it's happening. So, you know, It could include a dialogue. So it has to include at least 2 techniques or experiments. Don't just jump to the techniques or experiments. Okay, there's a lot more to a theory than techniques and experiments. So you're going to discuss what happened in your therapeutic session with Sam, not what you would do. You're going to talk about it as if it happened. Okay, this is what happened in the session. It's like session notes. Okay, it's all took place kind of in the present day, you know, and so you're going to be talking about Sam, not Sam's past, Sam in the present. Okay, so you're not going to be talking about Sam's dad or Sam's history. Sam's now in the present. Okay, where's Sam now? How is Sam's issues affecting him in his life now, not in the past? And so we're not going to mention the father or the mother at all after paragraph 1, after case history. We're just going to talk about Sam. All right. Now, obviously, real counseling isn't this rigid, okay? But I'm separating the exam this rigidly so you can have a good understanding of a case history of a session in the present and what you're going to do in future treatment planning. That's why. Okay, so you're going to describe the session using appropriate terminology. You're not going to jump straight to techniques or experiments. It's a lot more to the session than that. And but the session does need to include at least 2 experiments or techniques or interventions. Discuss how each technique is used, how it might play out in the session when used with the client. So you can't simply say, well, I'm going to reflect what Sam said. No, you have to actually do it. So I reflected what Sam said, and then you have to tell me how you did it. Sam said this, and I reflected it this way. So you have to give me examples of how you use the techniques. You can't just say you're going to do something. You have to show me how you did it in the session. So it has to be very descriptive, okay? You can't just use a term. You actually have to play the term out and tell me how it was used. You have to explain what happened. Okay, so that's the thing. You can't just use a term or a technique. You have to play it out in the session. All right. So discuss how each technique is used, how it plays out in each session when used with this client. What would a brief therapeutic dialogue look like? This section focuses on the client in the present, not the past. This should be the longest section of your answer. So this section's about, it doesn't have to be more than a paragraph, but it does have to be about a page. So section number 1, 1 paragraph, half a page. Section number 2, 1 paragraph, 1 page. Section number 3, 1 paragraph, half a page. The whole answer for each question is 2 pages, double spaced. Normal margins, normal spacing, Times New Roman 12 pitch, just in case anybody's wondering. All right, 1-inch margins. Don't indent the entire answer. Don't put my question in, number at 1, and then have the entire answer indented. Okay, so yeah, normal 1-inch margins for the entire answer. All right. Part 3. What would 8 weeks of therapy look like, and how would a treatment plan look applied to this specific client? Add anything from the theories you think might be important, anything you didn't use in part 1 or 2. Don't just list the therapeutic or theoretical attributes and techniques that you're going to use in future sessions. Describe how they'll be applied to Sam. And what's the expected growth? What's the expected outcome? So this focuses on the client in future sessions. It's your treatment plan. But you can't just say, oh, well, I'm going to uncover, the last two layers of his personality, you know, the implosive and the explosive. You have to tell me how you're going to do that. So you can't just say, I'm going to do such and such. You have to tell me how you're going to do it. What techniques or experiments are you going to use? How are you going to apply them to Sam specifically? So how is this answer catered to Sam, not just anybody? All right. So those are the three parts. Every question is going to have these three parts. Every question is going to have a two-page answer. Okay. All right. So the case study is kind of generic, but you should have enough general information for the case study and a session. Only use the primary theory. So Corey mentions a lot of related theories. So for example, you're only going to use person-centered theory to answer the person-centered question. You're not going to use Natalie Rogers, his daughter's theory on expressive arts. You're not going to use any other therapy, even though it's related. You're just going to use person-centered theory. That's it. All right. Um, Most likely, each answer will end up being 2 pages. Please submit your exam in a Word document to the Dropbox for exam 2. You can use your book notes, PowerPoints. Do not use the internet. Use your own words, except when applying theoretical terminology. All right. So questions about that. That's everything leading up to the case. Yeah, Jessica.
So is this kind of like the same structure as our like our role playing our tapes, kind of like the introduction, the
So
therapy session, and then the outlook?
yeah, so it should be almost exactly the same. So you're going to have a
Okay.
case, okay, which is in the past, what brought them here, and then you're going to have a therapeutic session. But instead of talking about what happened in the therapeutic session for part 3,
Hmm.
you're going to talk about a treatment plan for future sessions. That's the only difference.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Real
So, yep, go ahead,
quick.
Madison.
Um, I know that in the second paragraph you said to kind of treat it like the present, but if we're writing it like a session note, is it okay if we use like past terminology, like
Yeah,
session
yeah.
began?
But
Okay,
you're just going to talk about what happened in that
okay,
one
okay.
session. Yeah.
And like back to the not bringing up like dad in the present. It's okay if he like mentions dad and we put that in there and like how we respond.
No,
No? Okay.
no dad, no DAD,
Okay, so if he brings it up, we don't even write that down.
not in part 2. You're
Okay.
going to, because you've already written about it in part 1. It's
Okay.
done. You've already processed it in part 1. Okay. So for instance, now Sam's talking about what's going on in his present life. He's not talking about his past anymore. He's talking about, well, now I'm adult. I don't really feel fulfilled in my job. I'd love a significant relationship, but I don't have one. I have all of these interests, like I love museums and dinosaurs and paleontology, but here I am working in business. So that dad's nowhere to be found in that.
Okay, so we're not like reflecting on reasons why that might be.
You've
Okay.
already done that. You're doing that in part 1.
Okay. I just took part one as like we're discussing what the history is in the
Yeah.
client.
Yeah.
Okay. I
So
didn't take it as like the client was involved in part one.
he's not.
Okay.
We're going to discuss it because the dad definitely was in part 1.
Okay.
Case history, case history. It's a little confusing, I know.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So let's kind of read through the case and then we can kind of talk about some of the different theories and how you might apply some of them. Okay. All right. So Sam's a 30-year-old male. He is physically healthy. He entered therapy with the presenting problems that include minor anxiety, sadness, self-doubt, loneliness, a lack of personal meaning or purpose. He grew up as the middle child of two siblings. He was small for his age and was often teased by the other children in school. He had a close relationship with his mother. While his parents were together, they maintained what he considered old-fashioned roles. He was not sure what a modern relationship should be like, but he hoped that it would be more equal. Culture played an important role in his early family experience, but it also caused some arguments between his parents. His father was from Italy and was extremely traditional and conservative in gender roles. His mother was a mixture of cultural backgrounds and had grown up in a diverse neighborhood. She was quite progressive and independent. He did not talk about his parents' arguments outside of the house. In order to avoid any arguments, his mother would often bring the father a drink immediately after work, and no one would bother the father until he had time to relax. Sam saw his role as a peacekeeper. His father left the family when he was 8 years old, and the parents divorced. He had a sporadic relationship with his father after he left. He held some pent-up emotions towards his father even until now. He always thought he had to change to be accepted by his father. During his teenage years, he began to experience some anxiety. He also had stomach aches and headaches. He desired a dating relationship but had difficulty connecting. He began to fear rejection and often doubted himself. He felt that no one would like him. He loved music, reading, and visiting the Museum of Natural History, especially the dinosaur exhibits. As he became an adult, he often felt sad and lonely. He still desired a relationship. He held a variety of jobs in business, and though somewhat successful, none gave him fulfillment. He wanted to go to some higher education program, but was afraid of failure. At 30, he looked in the mirror and decided that he wanted a positive change. He decided to come to therapy because he believed that life should have more meaning. He also wanted a healthy family of his own someday. Okay, so here's your questions, and we'll talk about each one. All right, if you were Carl Rogers, how would you apply person-centered theory in detail to this case? Include a brief dialogue if you like. You can incorporate book, notes, my chapter that I wrote, and lectures. So, let's talk about if you were going to look at this case from Rogers' perspective, and you had the three parts to answer. So one is kind of case history. So let's look at that first. What are some things you think you might include in the case history?
I would definitely mention something about where to go. Oh, he began to fear rejection and often doubted himself. I would definitely touch on that emotion of fear
Yeah. So why do you think he felt that way?
because of how his father treated him as a child and how his mother kind of like let him get away with it by just giving him a drink and pushing him away.
Yeah. So basically, you know, he had to meet these external conditions to be accepted by his dad. Yeah. So he never felt unconditional love like Rogers would want us to. Yeah. So we're going to look at all of that. So kind of what brought him to, so part one, how did he get to 30 years old and feeling unfulfilled, basically? So part one, case history, 0 to 30 years old. All right, now he's in therapy in the present, okay? And so in part two, this is where we're going to really talk about what the session is, what a session is like. We've talked about case history with them already. We processed it. We've written up the case history in part one. So now we're going to address some of his current issues. And he wants to feel fulfilled. He wants to have meaning. And he wants to feel fulfilled in two areas of his life, his career and a relationship. Okay. And so we don't have to talk about his parents' relationship. We already did. We want to talk about what he wants in a relationship. Okay. And he wants a relationship built on equality and respect and mutual interests and all of those things. And he wants a career that he finds fulfilling. And you know some of the things he likes. He likes paleontology and music and reading. And, he would probably find those fulfilling. And in all of those would probably take a degree in higher ed, but he has this sense of possible failure, like he wouldn't be good enough. And all of that is something that he's internalized now as an adult, that, you know, he may not be good enough. And like we've talked about, good enough to succeed. Now he fears failure. Yeah, and he's internalized those conditions. And he doesn't believe it's okay to just be human and make mistakes and learn from them and grow. And so so you're going to talk about that in therapy. Okay. And so I would pick one of those issues to talk about. Career is definitely the easiest one to talk about. And then you could talk about maybe career and a relationship in the third paragraph, future treatment planning. So I would just focus on one, don't complicate it. Don't talk about two issues. But you're going to start using all of those techniques. You're going to use reflection, and you're going to use paraphrase, and you're going to point out incongruities, and you're going to clarify, and you might draw out a narrative, and not one about his past family, but about maybe what a job might look like, or maybe he had a trip to the museum and what he liked about it, and can he imagine himself, doing something like that. And so kind of a recent narrative. And then you're going to summarize. Yeah, Madison.
So I just want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding. We're like creating that part ourselves, right? Like, because there's nothing, we're not actually talking to someone named Sam, so there's nothing to like reflect on. And they're like, how are we like reiterating what he's saying if we're not talking to him?
Oh, yeah, you're going to make up a session with him.
Okay, I was just making sure that I was hearing that correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you do with this case in a session? What would it look like? Yeah. You get to make the whole thing up.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. That's the fun part. All right. And it is kind of fun. And the all right. So those are the techniques, and you can kind of use them throughout a little session. I just listed them for you. Um And then the last part is kind of what would you do over the next 2 months? Okay. Well, part of it, you're going to follow up on what happened in the session. Okay. And you're still going to use all those skills. And what would that look like following up over the next few weeks about career? Okay. And then you might begin talking about the other issue, a relationship, and he doesn't feel good enough, to be accepted for who he is in a relationship, you know, and, trying to get him to the point of self-acceptance as a human being, and that he truly deserves to be accepted, and If somebody doesn't accept him for who he is, well, that just might not be a good match. That's all. It doesn't mean he's any less than. Okay. So finding a positive relationship, we first have to accept ourselves for who we are and be genuine. And then we have to find somebody else who accepts us for who we are, and we have to accept them for who they are. So it's mutual, unconditional acceptance. Yeah. So that's kind of the answer. You just have to play it out and fill up 2 pages. But I know these instructions are very specific. So let's just process this first question and see if you understand it, or if you have any need clarification for any part of it. Because I'll kind of tell it to you in many different ways until you get it. Yeah.
But so in that second paragraph page, where we're doing, if you have a dialogue, do you want it just written out through the paragraph, or can we have multiple, like if it's chunky enough, can they be on their own lines, or is it just, I'm just trying to figure out how to document some of this stuff.
So you can, if you want to include a dialogue, the whole thing's not a dialogue. It's going to be like, narrative. This is what happened in the session. Here's an example of reflection and paraphrase in a dialogue. Okay. And then you're going to end it with a narrative. This is how we finished the session. Okay. So dialogue is a good way to give an example of a technique. Yeah. So I'd pick a couple, and I'd say, hey, this is how reflection played out with Sam. And we should be able to see some growth in Sam. Growth doesn't happen in the future. Growth happens in this session. How will Sam grow? What awarenesses will occur with Sam? So, yeah, I want to see your session work, because you're a good therapist. You can even control how the client responds in this case. All right. So ready to move on to question 2? All right. So if you were Pearls, and this doesn't mean you have to be sarcastic or mean. All right. It just means you're going to use Pearl's theory. You can be respectful and kind. How would you apply Gestalt theory in detail to this case? Include a brief dialogue if you like. And so same thing, same format, just a different theory. Okay. So what terminology would Pearls use when he's describing the case history? He'd use different terminology than Rogers would. Okay. And in the session, remember, we're not going to use like figure formation or anything like that, or figure ground. We're going to walk Sam through the layers of the personality. And the way we're going to do that is by using experiments. Okay. So remember, the first layer of the personality is phony. And Sam's really not himself in a business career. That's not who he really is, And because he's not being genuine, because he's kind of phony, and because he fears rejection, if he's truly himself, that's why people are phony. They fear rejection if people see their real selves, So he's wearing like this mask. And so we're going to use experiments to help Sam realize the mask that he's wearing. We don't have to bring out his dad. We talked about that in part 1. Okay. He's 30 years old. He's an adult. And, now he's incorporated all of these phony things to meet other people's expectations. No longer his dad, but colleagues at work, possible, significant others, whatever. And, you know, uh, and so what experiments might be good, you know, to help Sam realize, he's kind of being phony. He's not being his genuine self, you know? And so you could use kind of the mask thing that you saw in the student presentation. You can use role play where Sam talks to two parts of his own personality, like the empty chair. And the ex gets up and sits in the other chair and, talks to two parts of his personality, then reverses them. And, you know, but things like remaining in the present, staying with the feeling, I statements, they're not detailed enough for an exam. They're great techniques, but it's not like a role play or the empty chair or the masks. Those are detailed techniques or experiments that are great for an exam. And you'll see growth in Sam, and he'll realize, yeah, I was being phony. And the reason I was being phony and wearing that mask is because I was afraid. I was afraid to be rejected because I wasn't meeting other people's conditional acceptance. And so when he reaches that conclusion that he was afraid, that enters the phobic layer of the personality. He realizes he was afraid. And he got stuck. That's the impasse. Now he's stuck. He's 30 years old. He's in a job he doesn't like. He doesn't have a relationship. And he's stuck. And he got stuck a long time ago. And now he wants to be his true self. He wants to do something in his career that he loves, that he finds meaning in. He wants to be genuine and have a genuine relationship being himself. He wants to be accepted for himself. And he begins to realize all of this internally. And that's the implosive layer. He gets excited. And then the explosive layer, he's himself. He tries it out. So you might walk him through the layers of the personality using experiments in that session in part 2. In the treatment plan, he might not make it through every single layer. He might make it up to the impasse. And then in future sessions, you're going to talk about how you're going to help Sam with the implosive and explosive layer, and then maybe deal with the other issues. So maybe if you're dealing with his career in the session, you might move through the impasse and implosive and explosive layer in the treatment plan with the career, and then move on to relationships in the treatment plan. And what experiments would you use in the future, and how would you help him move through those and gain awareness and personal change and personal acceptance and genuineness? All right, questions about Gestalt? Did that make sense to you? The 3 parts?
It's making more sense as we go through it.
Yeah, it's gonna take a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so question number 3. All right, so this is the most straightforward one, okay? But the mistake students usually make is they only use WDEP when there's a lot more to Glasser's theory than that. So if you were Glasser, how would you apply choice theory and reality therapy with WDEP in detail to this case? I'm going to talk about this, but we have not yet gone over that theory. So we're going to go over that theory tonight after this. So the things to include, and I'll go into detail with this when we have the lecture on Glasser, is you're going to use WDEP as the technique. So it's a 4-part technique. It's really just one technique, but it has 4 different parts. That's the technique you're going to use in the middle session. Okay. In the first session, you're going to do the case history, but, Glasser believes that each of us has, basic needs and goals. And, we can apply them to case history. We can apply them in the present. And what needs are being met and what needs are not being met. And these needs kind of match Maslow's needs. They're slightly different, but that's where he got the idea from. So we'll talk about this one more when in the lecture for choice theory. But just remember, make sure you include basic needs and make sure you include the technique WDEP. Okay. And I would do the same thing. For the session, I'd probably talk about career, and then for treatment plan, move on to maybe follow up with career and relationship. So it's easy if you do the same thing for every question. It's a little easier following the same format. All right, so you probably don't have a lot of questions about question 3 because we're going to cover that tonight. But before we move on to the lecture, any questions about the exam in general? And you can email me, no problem.
Should we have a cover page?
Oh, go on.
To
This
it?
card I always want to claim.
Yeah, it's just always the opposite.
Well, I don't care if you have a cover page or not. You need to put your name on it and, divide up the 3 questions. That's really all I care about. Because it's not a paper, it's just an exam. Make sure your name's on it. Make sure you put exam 2 and list each question. What else? All right, so here's the biggest part of the exam. What's going to happen if you just mess this whole thing up? What happens?
We do it again.
You just fix it and do it again. That's it. No failure, no horrible thing. You fix it and do it again. That's it. So, hopefully that'll take a little stress away. All right. All right. Yeah. That's the goal, that you learn how to do it, not that you get a bad grade.